So maybe you could tell us about another study that you're involved in and how you think about the interaction of kind of questions that interest you in research design.
Okay, all right. So in another study that I carried, I looked at the relationship, or I looked at, I'll take a step back. So there's a broad trend right now in education, as I'm sure you're familiar with, where we're seeing more and more actors sort of entering the educational landscapes or the institutional field. So we're not simply, when we study education, we're not simply studying schools and districts and formal educational actors anymore. And we're studying other non-system actors, including different intermediary organizations that are intended or designed to provide different instructional support services for schools. With the inception of high-stakes accountability policies, we've seen a proliferation of these types of support providers for schools, in part because some schools and districts are under pressure to maintain a certain degree of test performance, so they're looking for outside providers to provide guidance and support that they don't find readily available to them inside of their schools or their districts, but also because these providers have been written into some of the policies, right? So we have provisions now that require districts to spend a certain amount of their Title I funds, for example, on supplemental service providers, as one example. I was interested in understanding what happened as far as instructional quality went for the most marginalized students in schools that were partnering with these intermediary organizations. So I carried out a study of one national intermediary organization and looked at 6 of its schools, all in urban environments, and spent some time studying, along with my research team, with my graduate students, spent some time observing classrooms and looking at the different types of instruction that took place in its schools. The intermediary organization marketed itself as providing instruction that was specific to English learners, an instruction that was culturally relevant for the student populations that the schools were serving, as well as providing or promoting instruction that was aligned with the state standards that are now aligned with standardized tests. And what we found was that while the organization believed that it was sort of promoting sort of all 3 sort of types of instruction and content in its schools, what we found was that there was actually quite a bit of variance there. We didn't see as much evidence of English learner strategies in place in schools that were still serving high numbers of English learners, or strong evidence of culturally relevant pedagogy in many of its classrooms. But what we did see across schools very consistently was a strong pattern of standards-based content. So that's very consistent with the literature on policy implementation that's already taught us that instructionally it's oftentimes easier to change the content than it is the pedagogy. And we saw that, which raises questions for me then about the amount of resources that are going into pulling in these other actors inside of public education, and they're now providing fairly core instructional services, oftentimes in many schools and districts. But it raises questions about the degree to which we're changing the actual pedagogical quality for some of our most marginalized students.